Today's episode is brought to you by Bizarro World.
It's high noon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to High Noon Podcast, the competitive Overwatch podcast. I am your host, Blevins. With me, as always, is Deathblow. What's up, buddy?
Not too much, my man. How are you doing?
Ooh. Oh, I'm doing all right. And you you didn't dodge a bullet. You got shot, but someone else jumped on a grenade.
Right. Yeah, it's been a crazy week as far as Overwatch League goes. To be perfectly honest,
today's episode is brought to you by Bizarro World.
Yeah, it's very fitting. I'm really interested to see what this means going forward. Everything's been turned on its head right now. Nobody knows which way's up, so we will have to wait and see how things shake out.
The parody puzzle has taken over control of the Overwatch League and is now the regular season. We don't even need to make corner case exceptions for playoff losses. The parody puzzle has now consumed all teams.
You're not wrong. It's definitely crazy, but yeah, it didn't stop the wheel, Blevins. It broke the wheel.
Yes,
that's the reference I want to go with, I think.
Right, we'll take it. But before we dive into that, let's talk a little bit of housekeeping. One thing that I want to remind everyone is that all of our shows are now on Spotify. So if you have not already, make sure you go on Spotify, search High Noon Productions, find every single High Noon podcast show, including this one, Around the Payload, Blackwatch Report, and Foul Play. They are all on Spotify. Make sure if you are a Spotify user that you do that. Speaking of Blackwatch Report, of course, they had a brand new episode this week talking about the Tier 2 scene. Make sure you give them a follow. They have their own feed as well as a Twitter. Make sure you follow them as well. Foul Play also continuing this week with our brand new hosts, Heebie-Jeebie, and returning host, obviously, A. Smith. They are manning the ship now, so they have been doing a great job, and might have some other hosts jumping in here and there as we nail down the format and the flow for the show. But I think it's in a really good place right now, and A. Smith and Hebe have done a great job thus far. And Around the Payload, I'm still working on some guests here. We're going to be bringing back Around the Payload as soon as I can get a group of people to come on, but that will be ASAP, of course. And before we get into the news, let's talk a little bit about what we did last week. Deathblow, anything fun and exciting for you?
Well, I mean, we kind of had the same thing here, I'm guessing. We've got the same thing to talk about since we went up to Rochester to celebrate your birthday.
I don't have a happy birthday. I don't have a happy birthday clip.
Feels birthday, man. But yeah, I had some mediocre garbage plates and had a good time.
You're not wrong, because they didn't have my pulled pork.
They overcooked the home fries. They didn't have hot sauce. It was a mess. But
I will say
I'll digress and mock you for it off air, like I was definitely.
I will say Maddie brought most of hers home because she wasn't feeling well, and I rejiggered the garbage plate and added some concoctions of my own, and let me tell you, it turned out great today. I took that mac salad, threw that right in the garbage, and that was it. No, I had some cheesy potatoes from my parents' birthday, or from the birthday celebration at my parents' house, and cheesy potatoes are really good. They're like home fries, but it's like mac and cheese made with home fries instead of macaroni. It's fantastic.
Yeah, they're good, and couldn't possibly be bad on a garbage plate. But most notable, I think, on the weekend was, I mean, we got to hang out with your brother. So I've never met Ninja before, but It was great to get some time to hang out with him.
He looks a lot different in real life, doesn't he?
Crazy different off stream. Like, it's insane.
Different color hair.
His hair's not even blue.
It's a wig, because my brother's actually bald.
Right.
It's not even a wig. He actually takes the blue hair, turns the blue color off, and then just moves it around to his face, so he's got the beard and is bald. Yeah,
it's weird. He looks like a metalhead in real life. Like it's so bizarre. But yeah, there we are. There we have it.
Yeah. The real notable thing was that myself, you, and my brother tag team and beat the Simpsons arcade game on an actual arcade cabinet for the first time.
You're not
in my
wrong.
life, which was
I thought we were going to be talking about the Tenacious D karaoke we did in the car.
Oh, that's a Patreon only discussion. So if you want to hear that one, go to patreon.com/iKnewPodcast. Tweet at us and we'll talk about it. Yeah, that is a premium discussion to be had. For
Spoiler alert, I killed it.
Yeah, and I wanted to kill something, namely myself. Let's move on here, and I definitely didn't cue up the sounds, but they're gonna be ready by the time I'm ready for them. News. There we go. Got there. That was better than it normally isn't when I cue them up. We have a number of pieces of info and new signings and moves and whatnot here. We have some irons that were in the fire that we can finally talk about. That makes it sound like we knew what they were. We didn't actually know. I had no prior information to this. We just knew that there were irons in the fire. We've got Carry On, main tank, Gargoyle, off tank, and DPI, DPS. God, that's going to be annoying. Have all joined the Florida Mayhem and are all coming from Armament from the Korean contender scene. In addition, they've made changes to their coaching staff, with Unred becoming the head coach, KH1 being added as assistant coach, and Ryu being added as an analyst. And of course, they all must have made a huge difference as they picked up a W this week, even though none of them played.
They sure didn't. Also, don't talk to me about that.
No, we'll be talking about it plenty.
There's no way to avoid it. I'm aware. Yeah, no, I think honestly, I don't know a ton about Armament as a team before this, but obviously we talked last week about the addition of the main support, and I was kind of like on the fence. I'm like, this is strange to me, right? Because main support hasn't been an area of inherent weakness to me, at least when I watched them playing. So I was kind of even specifically said, I'm like, hopefully, or maybe this is just like the order that they're announcing them, and there's an off tank and, you know, some other additions coming here that might have a better chance to turn things around for this team. Here we are. We've got obviously Carry On, the wayward son here to fill the main tank role.
Oh man, we should have gotten that. We need that.
We'll get it. We'll get it. Once he starts, it'll be there. Then we'll have Gargoyle at off tank. I think that's the one that's most notable here. It's going to be tough for the wayward son to really, I think, outperform Fate, who's got a bit of a record, but it's certainly possible. But Gargoyle, I think, can really step in and fill the biggest gap that this team's had, which has obviously been Zephyr on on off tank. It's been very inconsistent, which has included some good performances, as we saw this weekend, much to my dismay, and also some very iffy performances, and hopefully Gargoyle is able to come in and provide some stability there in that role. I think that's going to give them a good opportunity to help turn things around a little bit, and they certainly showed us they're capable of that. And then DPI, I don't know much about his hero pool, to be perfectly honest, but obviously he's going to, I think, get a decent opportunity here as he joins the kind of solid DPS core of Saya player and BQB. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how exactly that shakes out, but I think at least one of these additions should have significant playtime coming their way once I think they're all here now, right? Like they waited for visas to be approved to announce.
So.
According to what we've heard, they're in LA. They just haven't played yet, so we'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen with not as successfully, but with Soul Dynasty, and more successfully with NYXL, where they have a bevy of of DPS players. It's like, yeah, maybe SBB isn't good at this point in time, but maybe he comes back, and maybe we have a meta where we need 3 DPS players or 4 or whatever. So it's nice to have that. Maybe have some specialists in as well. I want to see if we can get this clip played. This is the Gargoyles opening theme, if anyone remembers this old 90s cartoon.
Thousands of years ago, superstition and the sword ruled.
Okay, this is too slow, but that's a clip from Gargoyles, so we're gonna need to get that queued up for next show. But That's if he plays. If he plays, we'll get it in. But yeah, so big moves for Florida. Obviously, not a direct. I mean, maybe it is a direct causation here. I mean, you make big moves even if they're not directly playing. It can be a boon to the team and give some morale. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. Another piece of news here: we've got Envy, of course, leaving the Toronto Defiant and now has joined the Shanghai Dragons. And Death, we talked about this as it was happening on Discord, and I want to kind of bring back that conversation. What are your thoughts on, Envy, an off tank, which we've over the years been at least relatively impressed with and quite happy with their performance. Leaving our poor Toronto Defiant.
Yeah, it's a little strange to me, right? Especially since Toronto kind of showed that willingness last week to be open to going back to Yakpung in the event that it was needed. And you thought maybe if that was the case, maybe you just go back to being able to speak Korean when you have 6 Korean players on the stage. But now that's not an option. They can't really fill out their roster at the moment and use wholly Korean players. They're going to need gods to play the off-tank role. This is one where I think the exact wording and what I said at the time was it doesn't have to make them worse, but it doesn't make them better. So it's kind of strange. I was pretty surprised to see this myself, but honestly, the way, especially after this weekend, which happened after this roster change did, after we're kind of seeing the way things are going, it's going to be really difficult, I think, for Toronto to turn it around. It's going to have to be, basically they'd have to have green jerseys in order to make a turnaround that fast from what we've seen. So I don't think it's likely, but they're nosediving in the wrong direction at the moment. They are a team that I still continue to think is reasonably well set up for the future.
Yeah.
And for an expansion team to come in and have any success with, with a stage 1 playoff or anything like that, it's really not that bad of a showing for your first year. And it's not over. Obviously we've seen 2 teams with 0-7 stages rally, and now we're talking about their playoff chances right now. Toronto's ahead of both of them in the standings at the moment, so it could get better fast. But how is getting rid of a player gonna help that? Especially a player of Envy's caliber, one who's easily dominated your stage time and who has the most synergy with the rest of your team. It's interesting and it's not disconcerting to me as a Toronto fan. It's just I want to know where their priorities are for the season, right? Because if they're not expecting or if they're not really aiming for the turnaround in the season playoffs this season, I'm sure they're not aiming to miss them. But if that's not their primary goal as a fan, I'd like to be able to adjust my expectations a little bit.
Yeah.
Because the 4-0 to Guangzhou was particular. Thank goodness we were out for that one for your birthday. That one was
a disappointing birthday gift for sure.
Yeah, it was tough enough to see the score afterwards and then have to go back and watch it. To have watched it live would have been pretty brutal, I think. So.
Yeah, I have to guess, and again, this comes with no outside information here. If I'm taking a guess here, they brought on Gods as a player that, like we said, is maybe at least on par. We're not really sure how he's going to perform in Overwatch League. Obviously, he's had good contenders. He's had at least decent contenders showings. Performances and showings. But, that doesn't necessarily translate directly into Overwatch League. So it's kind of a mix-up. But Gods is, a Western player, can be more of not a mascot for the team, but can be more relatable to the Toronto fans potentially. So maybe that's part of it. And if, you bring someone like that on, they start their first week. If I'm Envy, I probably tell the coaching staff, hey, ship me, I don't care that I'm making the team. Envy doesn't need to want to be the bench player, right? He can, that's completely his prerogative. So from Toronto's standpoint, yeah, maybe they did want to keep him, but from his standpoint, he was probably no, I'll go somewhere else and vie for my spot. If you're making this decision for this reason or whatever, maybe there's other internal issues that we don't know about. I don't know. Maybe he didn't want to be on the mixed language roster. that's another possibility. Although he's been on mixed language rosters before, but maybe he just doesn't want to be on one. I mean, he left L.A. for a reason, right? We don't know why. So if I had to guess, it's probably more on Envy, but maybe they made that decision to play gods in the first place, right?
And this doesn't have to be, Gods is the only off tank on Toronto. It's just he's the only one we know of now, because last week, I think it was, in the last episode, we were talking about Guardian being cut from Shanghai and what that did to their roster and left them with only Gaguri as a flex tank or an off tank. And now they have two. So maybe there's another call up from contenders or another signing or a trade of some kind coming from the Toronto camp that we don't know about yet. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I would tend to think probably not, because they've never been super deep in their roster and carried a bunch of backups. It's just not really been their style so far. We've not been down on gods by any means. We just liked Envy. So it's a little bit of a shock as a couple of Toronto fans to see and react to a player that really, was a big part of the reason why we were at least as hopeful as we were about this team going into the season. I know you were a little higher on them going in than I was for this year, but he was their experience. He was their captain, the one that him and Neko were the ones that had been here before and gave them maybe an edge over some of the other expansion teams. And I think we saw that in stage 1, and then it just didn't continue to come to fruition. So, but hey, if they're underperforming and they're not happy with it, not making changes isn't really the way to go either. True. But I don't think this is necessarily an addition by subtraction conversation.
Yeah. Until we get more info, which we probably won't get, but I have to imagine that there's more than just gameplay that's going on with Envy there.
And getting that extra marketability and connection to your fan base, all that stuff is phenomenal. But for me as a fan, you want that. That's all great, but it shouldn't come at the cost of talent or team success, or you know what I mean? I don't want that as a fan personally, but obviously they have to have different priorities, right? Their priority as a business is to make money, and carrying 2 off-tank players at potentially high salaries might not be the way to do that.
Winning is but one avenue, albeit a very successful one, to build a fan base.
Yes, the most guaranteed way.
Yeah, I think so. Well, unless you sign DeFran, that's another guaranteed way. But yikers is all I have to say about that. I'm gonna group all these next ones together because they're all coaching / analyst positions. Reprise has joined the LA Valiant as an assistant coach. Raccoon Panda has joined the Seoul Dynasty as an analyst, and Faustus has joined the LA Gladiators coaching staff. I mean, I don't think we have any particular insights into any of these players, but our normal label of more coaching staff is better. Always want to see more auxiliary staff. Maybe auxiliary is not the right word, but non-player support staff added to the added into the league. I think it just matures the league and the teams overall. No surprise that we're seeing 3 season 1 teams doing that, and
really 4 with all the Florida ones as
well.
True. And I don't have enough information about the Overwatch League coaches to really, I think, pass accurate judgment and analysis on their performance. So I'm certainly not going to pretend to have it for the contenders and tier 2 call-up coaches. But I do want to say Raccoon Panda, I'm not sure if I like the name or not. I think you do quite a bit, Blevins. I think you were talking about how much you like that name. But it reminds me of the Twitch clips random generated. It feels very much like you could give me like clips.twitch.tv / Raccoon Panda Reprise Faustus, and I wouldn't even blink an eye, and I'd just be like, what clip is this?
Twitch.tv / clips / Raccoon Panda Reprise Faustus. I think that might actually be a Twitch clip. Did we just solve the ARG and now we know what's going to happen? Yeah, we know. None of these coaches are actually real. This was just the next clue into the healer jockey hero that's going to be coming out that we called years and years ago. So overall, I think nothing too crazy. I mean, obviously we have more of a personal connection to Envy leaving Toronto than the others, and it's always nice it's always nice to see, well, for me at least, to see Florida, you know, their irons in the fire coming more to fruition. But we just got some potentially breaking news.
No, it's a rumor.
Oh,
it's a rumor.
Okay, never mind.
We've kind of had it for a bit, and it's come up. I know, like Monty talked about it a little bit on Oversight, things like that. It looks like the Rollock that we all thought we were going to be getting for Stage 3 might be coming Stage 4. We'll talk about it when it's official.
Yeah.
And go over our thoughts on everything once it's actually a thing. But
until Blizzard says it's not happening. In our minds.
For what it's worth, this is the second report. The first one came from like the Korean language caster for Overwatch League, leaked it a couple weeks ago. It seems pretty legit to me. I'm expecting it to happen, if for no other reason than I think the timing is weird and hard to explain. So, but we'll get into that when it's official and happens.
Yep.
Plenty to talk about from this week.
Till it's official. Nope, I got no rhyme. We're just gonna move on. We're just going to move right along. It's tournament talk. All right. Day 1 of Bizarro World Week starts with the San Francisco Shock surprisingly beating the Boston Uprising 4-0. Houston Outlaws winning 3-1 versus the Paris Eternal. The Hangzhou Spark getting a 3-0 victory versus the Dallas Fuel. The LA Valiant maybe upsetting. That was a close match anyway. The Shanghai Dragons 3-1. On Friday, we saw the NYXL. What looked like we were watching a Season 1, Stage 1 slobber knocker match against the London Spitfire. But NYXL ekes it out 3-2 in that match. San Francisco Shock wins 4-0 over the Florida Mayhem. Shanghai Dragons wins 3-1 versus the LA Gladiators. And the Vancouver Titans take down the Chengdu Hunters 3-1. On Saturday, we saw the London Spitfire barely eke out a victory versus the Washington Justice 2-1. Philadelphia Fusion coming out big, winning 3-2 over the Atlanta Reign. As we alluded to earlier, the Guangzhou Charge took down our boys, the Toronto Defiant, 4-0. Yeah, that's a sad boys. And the Hangzhou Spark win 3-2 versus the Seoul Dynasty. So far, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of a, maybe a 51 beating a 49.
Yeah. Maybe
a 60-40. Not even. Then we get into Bizarro World. Chengdu Hunters beat the Dallas Fuel 4-0. That's kind of a Bizarro World, right? Although Dallas is not.
Yeah, that was kind of right. Dallas is in free fall. They benched OGE and Unco for this game, though Unco seemed to have been sick. They cited an eye issue that came back, and
sure.
So I was pretty sure on the result of this one once I saw the lineup.
Gotcha. Boston Uprising beat the Paris Eternal 3-2.
In a staggering reverse sweep. It was pretty great. You should probably watch it, except for I hate you, Boston.
Yeah, Boston is kind of the king of the 3-2 sweep, or reverse sweep, rather. But here's where Bizarro World kicks in. Florida Mayhem, bring the mayhem against the Houston Outlaws, winning 3-1.
Why, God, why? Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Orange. I played the Outlaws, but I said orange. It's an R. Ah, got him. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll dive more deeply into that one. But here's the thing. You took your bullet here, but then a rocket-propelled grenade was launched, and the LA Valiant are the first term. History was made, folks. The LA Valiant take down Thanos in the Vancouver Titans 3-1. Boom.
Yeah. Every bit as crazy as the Outlaws versus San Francisco Shock upset earlier in the stage.
Yep.
It's funny, nothing changed, but everything changed, and the top teams are way weaker than they've been in the past. And I really think Houston just kind of gave people the confidence and the incentive to throw caution to the wind and stop playing goats if you're not succeeding with it. Like, it's the most commonly used definition of insanity, the AA definition of like doing the same thing over and over again, whatever, blah blah blah. But it's everybody seems to have finally woken up and realized we can just game plan for what we do well and adapt what we do well into the meta. We don't need to completely sell out and play the meta. And I think we're seeing a lot of these crazy results, and the parity puzzles restarting itself after it was fully completed and everything like that is happening in part because Houston came out and really demonstrated that you don't have to, be a sheep and follow the meta. And it's funny, the fans knew that going into stage 2, and it took the league a couple of months to really catch up to Reddit and let that sink in. But yeah, absolutely crazy. We'll get more into the results of both of those surprises at the end here in a minute. But yeah, great. Honestly, throwing away my fandom, great to see these teams give, like, Florida's not they're not even in a Valiant or Houston situation where the playoffs, but they gave their fans something to be excited about. And they did it by not even using their new additions. So now what's their ceiling, and could they actually be that tough out, that team that can play spoiler and make the league better and more exciting going into stage 4?
They could be a Philadelphia Fusion. I mean,
except for the sneaking into the playoffs and going to the finals.
Now, like, they could be that team for the rest of the season, though. Like, it's great to be able to see more teams be able to win. And I think even if, because, well, I guess we'll start off talking about the Mayhem Outlaws game. Like, the first...
before we go too far, did you want your riddle, or your, not riddle, but your rhyme that you were looking for earlier?
Oh, I sure do.
What was the... since it's not official, we'll be judicial and wait.
There we go. I like it.
Yeah, I got it.
If it's not official, we'll be judicial. There we go. There's an episode title for you. Yes, but it was funny. Well, it was funny for me. The Mayhem versus Outlaws match, like, it started off and like Outlaws dumpstered Mayhem in that first map. Like, it really wasn't that close. And it's like, this is just, business as usual. Let's go through. And then, this guy that maybe, Death to, I think you might have done this. You are the one that's been calling for Saya Player to just play Saya Player on DPS forehead. And
it was the exact same thing as Houston, but I just didn't care. Other than my fantasy team, I didn't have a horse in that race, so I wasn't as upset about it. Listen, this was a great match, honestly. Going into it and predicting it, I predicted Houston 3-1. This was very difficult to see coming. But in the 3-1, I said Paris and Hollywood are bad Houston maps. I could easily see them losing one of them. And then they lost both of them. And then we go into map 4, and it was an incredibly close map 4. True. It was phenomenal to watch, even as a Houston fan, in the throes of what should have been like, almost depressing or whatever it should have been. I was just like, wow, like I couldn't even get mad in the moment because the Bastion switch at the last second, right after Houston had the big ult combo they needed to push, and they were running low on time, so you had the fun of the timer being there instead of like, who's gonna have more time at the end. Like, they held Florida before full completing the map, so if they'd have been able to push to the victory box, it would have just been map over, go to 5, where Houston probably would have been hugely favored because it was Koth and we saw map 1 and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, it was honestly a super close 3-1. Make sure you check it out. Even the bad Houston maps were close as well. Thankfully, going forward, we don't have Paris or I'm blanking on the other map,
Havana,
Hollywood, on the schedule for Houston anymore at this stage. So I'm really happy about that. This is a team that's always been really swingy based off of maps, and I stopped talking about it in stage 2 because they stopped winning anything. Maps didn't matter; they were out the window. And now they're season-long map records. But even last stage, when things were bad, Paris was head and shoulders worse than the rest of them. Hollywood has historically been every bit as bad as Route 66 has been for this team. It's just come up less often in the map pools, so it's maybe a little bit less known. But it's something we're going to have to really watch out for with Houston, and we're going to have to look really, I think, beyond the numbers, because stage 2 is going to ruin a lot of those maps that aren't going to be bad Houston maps, but might look like it on paper. So we've kind of got to remember Route 66, Hollywood, Paris, just terrible, terrible maps for Houston, and it's going to give them the opportunity to lose to anybody every bit as much as the good maps give them a chance to beat anybody, like we saw against San Francisco. So,
yeah, I mean, we saw literally, like, Houston is like they are the smasher of the parody puzzle, right? Or maybe the creator of it. I'm not really sure where to go with it. They literally upset, in at least some people's eyes, the best team in the league, a top 3 team, inarguably.
Yes.
And then they lose to, in some people's eyes, the worst team in the league, and inarguably a bottom 3 team. It doesn't get any better than that.
I mean, it depends on your perspective, but I get it.
From your
perspective,
I want all of those teams to lose.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, and for what they've done, like, honestly, if you're enjoying stage 3 more than you thought you would, and I think viewership is panning that out, it's climbing,
starting to get back up there. Yeah,
it's starting to come back up.
Starting to see Widowmakers and Pharahs and Mercies.
Love Houston or hate Houston, you owe them. Like, I just really feel like you need to thank them for just finally giving in and being willing to do what everybody thought they should have done initially, and just setting the stage for these other teams to stop playing so much goats and have success and change, just flip the script on everything. Like, they've made this stage so much more compelling than I think anybody really thought it would be going into it, without a major meta shift, and with the meta not really changing between stage 1 and 2, despite a huge patch. And now we're getting more change with no patch notes.
Right.
And I really think it's just that initial patch. That's how good it was. Like, I wasn't wrong when I said it's really rewarding to play DPS. Like, you can really pop off. And you see, Jake just tearing goats compositions to shreds on Pharah. You see, Saya player he was on fire on Widowmaker in the Houston matchup. Linkser was a little off, and Saya was not. It reminded me a lot at times. It was less Widowmaker than the Shanghai match last season, where Shanghai, despite being 0-37 or whatever it was, like, went to 5 against Houston. It was super, super close. And why? Because somebody popped off and tried to carry and did really, really well. Yeah, Dia went nuts. And it was a little bit Saya player's turn. It wasn't quite so centered around one person. There was a lot of other players playing well for Florida.
They actually have a number of players that are good on paper.
Bare minimum competency across their roster, even if the wins aren't there, that Shanghai certainly didn't have. So, just props to all these teams from the bottom, including Houston, despite the loss. They're still in a great spot. We're going to be talking a little bit more about, like, their probabilities of qualifying for the playoffs coming up. We've got all the teams with a chance still, but Houston's over 50%. They're on pace to be that last seed going into the playoffs, or maybe better, because what are we looking at here? Like a 5-2 record for them? A loss to anybody notwithstanding, right? Like, you could have told me going into the stage, you're going to lose to Florida, but you're going to be 5-2 and make stage playoffs. I'd have signed on the dotted line so fast you wouldn't have been able to see straight. So it was unfortunate. We talked last week about the good teams have to win the games they're supposed to win. This isn't what happened here, but I think Houston's more a middle of the pack team, with the ability to get hot in a meta that suits them, and then they are an elite team or a top tier team, and we're seeing that play out. So it'll be interesting to see going forward.
And I think from the flip side, like, Florida is not the dumps. I don't think that, at least with their roster, they are not the dumpster fire that they've been up until this point. I think this is almost like a pressure valve for them.
Once they added Fate, I would agree with you. And this is really the first time they've played the roster I thought they should have played after signing Fate. Like, we didn't see Byram. We just saw Hagopin play all the maps. He played really well. He had a really good set against Houston. Fate looked decent. There was just the only one to me that really, really stood out regularly was Saya player. You know, everybody else kind of had their ups, had their downs. It was a very close set. But you know, we're seeing them turn it around and play better with just the shadow of the new guys looming, right? Like, you know, we talked about that last week when Yakpung came back in, played really well. Somebody on your bench threatening your job can just make you play better. And that could have factored in. There's a lot of things. It was maybe a perfect storm for Florida, but I don't know. I think we're looking at a team that's going to be a tough out. Even if the wins don't come pouring in, they're going to be a tough out now. You're going to see some competent play. You're going to have to really put the time in during the week to study them, figure them out, and beat them. And that's new, and that's good.
Yeah. I mean, if anything, it'll take away from it will take away when Florida is only one of your matches for the week. It will take away from the practice that you're going to be able to do for your other match, or you are actually threatened with a loss now, which is, I think that's just good overall. It does equal the playing field out just that much more. But all right, you made it through the hot seat. We won't go too much more back to the Houston loss, because that wasn't even the biggest upset of the week.
No,
the biggest upset was the match directly after it, as Thanos snapped his fingers and he disappeared. LA Valiant takes out Vancouver Titans 3-1. This was another great match, and it started again like the King of the Hill map at the beginning was like, oh yeah, no, Vancouver, it wasn't like a complete steamroll, but Vancouver won 2-0 pretty handily. It's like, yep, nope, just business as usual. It's last match of the weekend, okay, blah blah blah. And man, LA Valiant just really, they pulled through. They had some really great plays. I know you were talking. Kareev really had a career night,
a godlike performance from Kareev yesterday. Absolutely, without a doubt, he was he got to be one player of the match. It was very well deserved. He made some huge, absolutely clutch plays on the Anna. He was just, to me, the difference maker, and that's not to discount what the other things that the Valiant have been able to do. If you didn't get a chance to watch, they benched Space. They brought Shax in to play that 3 DPS kind of Houston style. And yeah, they were shacked in a fool. Can we start to just make straight up shacked
in a fool? Yeah, no, I'm in it.
Yeah, and Fact Fiction, I thought, had a really, really strong game. But yeah, Shax isn't even practiced on Sombra. I'm pretty sure he said he had 3 days to learn it before the Shanghai game earlier in the week or something like that.
I guess you don't develop the bad habits then.
That's you're not wrong. You just watch the best players, you just watch the Shanghai and the Houston matches and see what their Sombra players are doing, and you copy it from there. And then make any adjustments you want to, and you don't have to, worry about what the off-tank players were doing in the metas before this and why it wasn't working great for them. So, yeah, it's really hard to pinpoint. I mean, I think this is another one. There's just, and this happened a couple times in Overwatch League. There's just something in the air, and just one of those days. Like last time, Vancouver was the only team that wasn't a part, wasn't the upset team in that day, and now they were kind of the headliner of it. I don't think me or you really ever expected them to go fully undefeated throughout the season, but I was starting to just get a little bit of doubt in that, though, because we said all last season Shanghai's not going to go 0-40. It's just that's not how leagues work. Law of large numbers. They play 40 games. It's just never going to happen.
Literally had never happened in any professional sport ever.
And now the games were shortened, and there was fewer of those, so it was technically easier to go perfect in one direction or the other. But I still really didn't expect it to happen, and it caught up with them. It's not been a secret that they've looked beatable. In this stage thus far. They don't adapt well into the Sombra style of gameplay. So when they play against a team that does play it very well and they feel like they need to copy it, they're at a disadvantage. And that's exactly what happened here with the Valiant, who gave them no time to prepare for it. They only showed it earlier in the week against Shanghai. Vancouver, I believe, had another match earlier in the week they needed to prepare for as well. They had to play against Chengdu the day before. So back-to-back games, and back-to-back days, or no, that was actually the end of Friday. It's weird because we're in the East Coast, so it bumps the game down every day.
2 days before.
But yeah, so listen, I mean, props to the Valiant. This is not the first time they've kind of reset their roster mid-season, set a new course, and found success with it. So their coaching staff, their new players, all the acquisitions are part of this. And done a great job getting this team ready. You know, and it's nice to see even, you know, Space like ran out onto the stage as soon as they won and like was giving everybody a hug and was on cloud nine just with the entire rest of this team and just as happy as can be.
No,
and
London was on cloud nine. They're immortals.
I know, I get it, but
I'll give myself
two level one. Yeah, see yourself out, Blevins. Wait, but don't, because we need you to stream and record. But yeah, you know, I love seeing that because that tells me that the team is mentally in the exact right spot, right? Like Spaces didn't lose his job. He just isn't on stage right now because there's 3 DPS players out there, and he's not going to be as good on a DPS hero as a DPS player is, even if Shaxx hadn't known the hero already and had to pick it up and learn it.
The inherent mechanics are much more in his favor.
Right. His time on Tracer just translates to give him more effectiveness on the hero. So I think, you know, the future's bright for the Valiant. I will say this though, their schedule looks kind of tough for like stage 4. I still think Houston has a better.
They beat the big dog. Who cares? They beat anybody, right?
Sure,
unless
but
we're playing against NYXL, in which case they can.
Sure, but I mean, using that logic, Vancouver's doomed. They're going to lose out. You know, it's that's crazy talk, and so we're not going to give that too much credence, and we're just going to say that, you know, they're going to be better, and you know, look at Houston as an example, right? Everybody, they're going to go 6-1. They beat San Francisco. What on their schedule could they lose to? And then you find it, right? They're playing a composition tailored to beat goats. What happens when they play a team that's not playing goats? Then they need to figure it out. And then they're that mid-table team again that doesn't have this matchup studied and figured out. So it's going to be really interesting to see what exactly all these teams are going to do, and we're just going to be looking at one hell of a play-in race or a wild card race going into the end of stage 4. It's going to get nutty, and it's going to hopefully be a blast because it's a little bit ridiculous that it goes 12 teams deep. Well, I'll keep tabling that discussion for a later time. Because I don't want to cost myself or dampen anybody else's enjoyment of the fun that we're about to have, because it will be fun. I'm just not sure it's the best form of competition, but yeah, we'll table that for when we get there.
Yeah, speaking of not the best form of competition, it seems like we already talked about Toronto not being really up to snuff the stage, but Atlanta also basically peaked at beating NYXL back-to-back weeks, and they really have not been getting a lot of wins since then. Are they done? Are they out? Like, what's going on with Atlanta?
Well, if we look at the standings, they're at 16 right now, so they're tied with the Valiant, and they're a game ahead of Houston right now. But you have to look at the trajectories of these teams, right? Like, you've got 2 teams below them that are figuring it out. They're headed in the wrong direction. I think they're just that classic case of that team that plays to the level of your opponent. My Sabres did that for so many years. It drove me insane. It's a very difficult thing to watch as a fan, to be perfectly honest. But at the end of the day, you at least are competitive in your games. You're not getting blown out. They've only got a -6 map differential. You know, Houston's at -19 because they completely tanked out a stage, whereas Atlanta's never really done that, though they're a little bit in the midst of it right now, as they're 0-5 at the moment on the stage. They're not done, right? Because if the other teams could go 0-7 and you know, but it has to be immediate at this point, right? Because now you need
running out of time.
Right, and you need to look at what the schedule is for them going forward, and I don't have that in front of me necessarily for the future, but they have their homestand weekend. You know, that's really their moment, right? It's Toronto and Florida they play against there. You have to put those away, and then you go into stage 4, and it's Hangzhou, and then it's Paris, and it's Houston, and you know, that Houston matchup could be huge. They've also got the Justice, but then they've got London, so they need to go on a run. Is what they need to do. They need to do what some of these other teams that are rebounding are doing, and it has to start and the homes, you know, the homestand coming up. It absolutely needs to be a 2-0 week for them there, and then it needs to continue. They need to start upsetting people. They don't really have too many cakewalks left on their schedule. There's a couple, but when you're 0-5 in a stage, what even is a cakewalk? It's really hard to project those teams to make the turnaround until they start. So we kind of have to assume they're, it's Atlanta, it's Toronto, it's Boston, and it's Philly that are in free fall, that are making room for these teams to climb up. And, it's even Dallas too. Dallas is on fire at the moment. And those are spots that are currently, or those are teams that are currently in the play-in bracket right now. And if they fall out, somebody has to come up. So maybe they can turn it around, but they're in such free fall that it's really hard to see happening. We know it can. We're watching it happen for multiple teams at the moment. But it's a zero-sum game, right? When one team wins, one team loses.
Right.
So when these teams are winning, these are the teams that have to step in and absorb the losses so that the other teams can go on a stretch. So we'll see. I'm guessing Atlanta and Dallas both are going to be casualties and probably not make play-ins because the other teams seem too hot to derail.
Yeah, you definitely want to be on the trajectory up now, not have the padding that you're slowly eating away at with these losses every week. But speaking of
that padding's gone for Atlanta completely, and Dallas has 2 games left of padding before they're done.
So they're definitely going to have to make a run as well. But let's talk a little bit about probabilities to qualify for Stage 3 playoffs. This little graphic was provided courtesy of Philippe ERC1 on Reddit. Posted this, and so if anything is inaccurate, you can blame them. But we got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 teams here that technically have a chance. Now, I use chance very loosely here, so I'll start at the bottom. We've got the Toronto Defiant with a under 0.01% chance of making these stage playoffs. I can't imagine how that happens, but it needs.
Well, they're only
to be...
0-3. Like, it feels like it's terrible, and it feels like the whole stage is gone. But they're only 0-3.
Oh, yeah, 4-3, sure. Yeah,
but how do you you just got 4-0'd by Guangzhou? So I'm with the graphic in the sense that I can't see it, but it's a win out, and it's very feasible.
Yeah, the numbers themselves are actually not as strong. I was thinking we were 0-4 right now, but yeah, you're right. Okay, then
they've got 2 matches each of the next 2 weeks to finish out.
True. We've also got Chengdu at a 0.07% chance of making it. We've got Guangzhou with a 6.23% chance, which is significantly higher than the others. We've also
Paris 3.08.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've got Paris. Yep, at 3.08% chance. So I mean, these teams are fringe. I mean, they're not mathematically out, but they're
those are the teams that won't be making it. So we don't really need to discuss them. But
they're one loss from, I think, pulling the cord on their own guillotine. Then we've got Philly at a 15% chance. We've also got London at a 14% chance. These are like and I guess the next jump up is Houston at just over a coin flip at 56.
Well, they're like penciled in right now. Is that really the next jump up?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really feels pretty solved looking at these numbers. Like, it doesn't feel. How does this work out?
7,
because Houston's currently a 9th.
8, 9. Yeah. So I don't know exactly how these numbers are made up, but Houston is 9th right now, and they have over a 50% chance. So I'm guessing that the way that the matches play out is that, if they win their coin flip, one of the teams above them can't make it, obviously, because there's 8 teams above them. But to round it out, we got Houston at 56% chance. We've got the Gladiators at a 71% chance. Seoul Dynasty 79% chance. We've got LA Valiant at a 73% chance. Shanghai at an 81%. And then we've got San Francisco Vancouver and New York at all greater than 99% chance. NYXL is at 99.99%. So just as likely to not make the playoffs as the Toronto Defiant are to make the playoffs. So that's an interesting little factoid there. But yeah, so I mean, basically you've got the big three at the top. You've got both LA teams. You've got Seoul, and you've got Shanghai as right now as it's in Hangzhou at 98%. Those are your playoff teams, with Houston being right on the outside looking in at a 56% chance, and then the other teams kind of on the auxiliary here. But I mean, I think the biggest thing is we have two 0-7 team, formerly 0-7 teams, the LA Valiant and the Houston Outlaws. Like, one of them basically a lock, and the other, controlling their own destiny in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it's just bizarre looking at it. If you showed people these standings and these percentages before the stage started, I think you would have been asked to like take a drug test or something like that. Like, it's just it was so exceedingly unlikely.
Yeah.
But it's the world we live in. It's the parody we've been talking about since stage one. Here we are, just bask in it, enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, playoffs. I mean, people complained about goats and how everything. This might be one of the more fun stages we've had of Overwatch, just in general. The game itself is fun. The team dynamics are fun. The storylines are great. Like, this is. I feel like we're in the Pax Romana right now of Overwatch.
Yeah, and it feels like the teams that are succeeding the most are the ones that, like, I mean, you've got New York, which is pretty hard stuck in Somber Goats, but the teams that are surprising you, at least, are the ones that are throwing the composition away completely, and you've got a lot of teams either following suit or just looking worse because of the presence of these other teams that are making it difficult to prepare. And yeah, it's just fun.
Yeah, I mean, when we finally start seeing the bottom and middle tier teams being like, yeah, no, we're not just going to run the meta because the meta doesn't favor us because we're at the bottom and middle, and do what they think is better.
Boston and Dallas stink, and Houston's good. What more could I have possibly asked for coming into the stage? That's Toronto, like I wrote the script myself.
Good. Toronto being good. Okay. You forgot to write that part in. But
only death can pay for life, Blevins.
What is dead may never. No, it doesn't work. But let's move on here before we get too sidetracked. Let's break it. Talk about the upcoming matches here. We'll start with Thursday. We've got the Hangzhou Spark versus the LA Valiant. I'll start it off here. I'm not picking the team that just took down Thanos to lose. Give me LA here. Okay, Hangzhou is, in a lot of people's minds, a top 5 team right now, and I don't disagree. But man, there is no higher high to have overcome right now than what the LA Valiant have just done. Give me LA. I think it's going to be a close one. Give me LA Valiant here, 3-2.
It's like you already forgot what happened in the game before that. I'll be taking the Hangzhou Spark 3-2. It's like it's going to be super close. This one is a true coin flip in my mind. So let's flip the coin. I mean, Hangzhou's looking great. Valiant are looking improved. But I think you have to treat the first loss of a team as kind of an anomaly, right? Like, so I'm not going to predict the Valiant to suddenly be absolute world beaters. That wouldn't make any sense. Hangzhou's look solid. They've done nothing to force me or make me think they aren't favored here against the Valiant. But I think it's going to be crazy close because how are the Hangzhou Spark going to adapt to what the Valiant are doing?
Right.
There's a couple matches of it on tape now for them to review. So maybe the sailing will be a little less smooth for the Valiant going forward. We will see, and it will be in the first match of the week. We also need to get to our coin flip. Blevins, who do you want to be tails in this?
Tails never fails for the LA Valiant.
It is tails. So
there we go.
Coin is going with LA.
Coin knows what's up. All right. Next up, we've got the Paris Eternal versus the Seoul Dynasty. I'm still not sold on Seoul and their ever-changing roster. They just lost to Hangzhou. That was their only match, which, I mean, is not. They lost 3-2. It was a close one, but I'm still not completely sold on it. However, I'm more sold on it than I am of Paris for I'm sure. So give me Seoul 3-1.
Yeah, Seoul's really come crashing down to earth. Paris isn't terrible, but they're not good either. So I'm going to take Seoul in the exact same score, 3-1 here.
Yep. Moving on, we got San Francisco Shock versus Chengdu Hunters. This feels like not just one tier of difference, but multiple tiers. It's not NYXL, but give me San Francisco. I would say the 5-0, but I'll stick with a measly 4-0 here.
New York's not here, so the 5-0 can't be called.
Right.
4-0 for San Francisco. They took that loss to Houston to heart. They doubled down. They did all the prep they needed to. They're better prepared for the DPS compositions, the Sombra compositions now than they were then. They're not going to lose again this stage. Give me San Fran.
Yep. Next up, on Friday, we've got the London Spitfire versus the LA Valiant. Again, man, like LA is playing for playoffs here. They're at that 73.32% to make it right now, but they got to win these matches. London also would need to win it in order to get in, but I just think Valiant, and this is another case of like, if Valiant gets dumpstered by Hangzhou, maybe I'm not picking London here, but especially if LA Valiant wins, give me LA here. I do think it's going to be close. I think these teams are very close right now, but LA just give me that just a little hair up here. I'll take LA 3-2.
So I think the Valiant's plan for this meta is just better than London's. Like, I think London was playing like Prophet on Sombra this week, and they didn't. I told you guys what to do. Just bring in Guard, let him play over Bird Ring, and then you're all set. But I mean, in all seriousness, that's not what they did.
I do too.
I hate Bird Ring when it's difficult to play Widowmaker on every single map. Like, it's his performance on that hero versus the other heroes is a very big difference. And especially when you want Sombra, and we've seen Guard play it well. It's not like he's an off tank or anything like that. On paper, London's the better team, but yeah, I'm going to take the Valiant 3-2. I just think they're hot, and they've got this meta figured out better than the Spitfire do.
Yep. Next up, we've got Toronto Defiant versus LA Gladiators.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, it saddens me to say this. I don't think this is a tier level difference right now. And Gladiators are just that much higher right now. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm obviously rooting for Toronto to make the comeback here, but they got to show it. They're at the point where they got to show it to us at this point. Big demoralizing, at least to the fans, loss last week against Guangzhou, and I mean they had poor performances the rest of the stage. Give me Gladiators 4-0 here, but I mean. This is, however, a match that they could turn things around, and like this would be a big one for them to at least be competitive in, but I'm not calling it.
I mean, every week's had that big upset that doesn't make any sense, but it just happens anyways. And I want this to be that one.
That would be nice.
But in order for that to happen, that means I need to pick the Gladiators here 4-0. So that's what I'm
right. It's not an upset if we call it.
Right.
It'll never happen if we call it. That would be too much. Next up, we've got the Houston Outlaws versus the Washington Justice, and Washington definitely has that clause of they are playing, therefore I'm not picking them to win. Give me Houston 4-0.
No Paris, no Hollywood, no Janice, no win. Houston 4-0.
You lost me there, but I agree.
It works. It works. Just write it out and cancel out the double negatives. Yep. Yeah, you'll figure it out.
I'll get there eventually. Let me get my abacus out. Next up, we've got the Dallas Fuel versus the New York Excelsior. Yeah, I'm stamping the 5-0 on this one right here. Give me NY 5-0.
You're right to do that. What in God's name is Trill doing in there? OGE was not a problem for this team.
Yeah.
Unco was hurt. Harry Hook had to step in. Fine. They said in the tweet that they expect Unco to be back for next week. That will help. But Dallas is just in free fall. I can't believe it. I loved how they looked coming out of stage 2. They're trying to play the DPS compositions a little bit, and unfortunately for them, that means Zachary plays DPS heroes. His Dragon Blades looked roughly as good as they did at the World Cup this weekend. New York is not the team that Dallas is going to get right against. New York 4-0.
Yeah. Correct. Next up, we've got the Boston Uprising versus the Philadelphia Fusion. And I do think this one's going to be close, but I'll start off here by saying I'm picking Philadelphia 3-2 in this victory. But Death, tell me why you're picking your least favorite team in the entire league.
Philly's 80% favored in fan vote, and that doesn't make
That's wrong.
any sense.
That's just wrong. Okay.
It almost doesn't matter who the opponent is for Philly. They've been rough enough that there's no 80% positivity. People forget Boston came back and did the reverse sweep. I think they're also forgetting that these 5-map wins for Boston tend to come in bunches. I'm gonna say Boston wins another 5-map set 3-2. I think it's razor thin. I think both teams are playing pretty bad right now. I'm not high on either of these teams. I would probably very slightly favor Philadelphia here, but not by an 80% margin. So I'm going to play the money ball strat and go for Boston 3-2.
Yeah, and I think you can flip your coin here, and I'll even let you have tails never fails for your Boston uprising.
No, for Philly. Let's be real. It's tails, and I'm really glad I because I'd have been pretty.
Looks like the coin is in that 80% fan vote as well. Next up, we've got the Florida Mayhem versus the Hangzhou Spark. And you know what? This is I'm pulling my card now. Florida just got their win. I'm back on the train. Punch my ticket. Give me Florida here 3-1. It's definitely not going to happen, but I'm picking it because you know what? I want to be right. I want to be right one time for Florida. And I've shot so many blanks so far. None of my shots are hitting the target, but they just came off of a big win versus the Houston Outlaws. They can do it again. Give me Florida here. They're looking better. This would be huge. This would be absolutely huge. I think this could put Florida, not obviously it doesn't put them in the running for anything, but it puts them like solidly in like this is, they're jumping up multiple spots in my mind if they win this one. So give me Florida here. Give me 3-1 for Florida.
Okay, give me Hangzhou 3-1 because I'm not an idiot. Here's your coin flip. I promise it said Hangzhou wins. Okay.
You checked and made sure we didn't have any discrepancies again.
I did. I absolutely made sure I didn't need that coin for the rest of the episode before I did my joke. Yep.
Perfect. I can't even argue with that. That was professional.
I executed it way too perfectly. Yeah.
Well, I mean, join me. You know what? Let's get Florida up. Let's get Florida 80% here. I want to be able to tweet them a picture and give them that extra boost of confidence. Spirit bomb with me. Spirit bomb with me. Let's get them.
Standing there all by yourself.
Yeah. Just me. It's me and Pesto enthusiasts screaming at the top of our lungs, and Monkey Prince screaming.
I was going to say TMP might be there, but he's been way too rational about his Florida fandom, I think, to join you on this one.
True. All right, next up, we've got the Shanghai Dragons versus the Guangzhou Charge. Yeah, I mean, Guangzhou did just get a 4-0 victory versus Toronto, but that is not worth as much stock as it once was. Give me Shanghai 3-1 here.
I'm going to go Shanghai 3-0 because Guangzhou used up all their map wins last week. They're out of them for the stage. They're good enough to not lose a map, but they're not good enough to win one because they used them all up. So yeah, I'm going to go Shanghai here 3-0 because reasons.
I hate it, but also love it. Next up, rounding out the week going into Sunday, we've got the LA Gladiators versus the Vancouver Titans. And while Thanos was taken down last week, he is back, and I would believe at full power, if not even stronger than he once was. It's still Vancouver. I'm still not picking them to lose. They're gonna need to string some losses together for at least a little bit before I start picking them to lose. Vancouver 3-1 here.
Some pun about Infinity Stones or something. I don't know. Superhero movies are dumb. Vancouver wins 3-1.
Yeah, I mean Gladiators is good, but they're not that good. Next up, we've got the London Spitfire versus San Francisco Shock. I mean, I think this is almost the same tier difference here. San Francisco in Vancouver versus Gladiators in London.
It feels similar, yeah.
It feels very similar. I'm picking the not underdog here, San Francisco 3-1.
Yeah, I'm going to go the same. Again, London's plan for this meta just doesn't feel optimal to me. It's like adequate, but adequate doesn't beat one of the top 3 here.
Right.
And just to go back real fast and offer some actual analysis on Gladiators for Vancouver instead of my just disparaging superhero movies. Gladiators feel better equipped with Surefour in the lineup playing the Brig and when they're in goats to like be able to play the DPS or the Sombra stuff. They're just not doing it. So like I have a really hard time giving them much more than your classic puncher's chance. You know, anybody can beat anybody, as now been proven. But yeah, so that's why I don't really give them much of a chance and why I kind of glossed over it, because they're not showing like they're equipped to do it in my opinion, but they're not showing a willingness to do what they would need to do to beat Vancouver. So yeah, it's going to be Vancouver.
I mean, maybe the gates are open this week and just everyone plays all sorts of crazy stuff because
I mean, this is on Sunday and maybe all Sundays are weird and we just haven't been paying attention for all I know.
Maybe so. Next up, we've got your, I guess, team killer. I don't even know what you would call this. Your 2 teams playing against each other, Houston versus Toronto. They're in different places in their professional careers than they were in stage 1. I can't pick that 3-2 win for Toronto like we saw back in that season opener. I got to pick Houston here 3-1.
Only death may pay for life. Kill him, Houston. Let's go get him. 4-0 for Houston. It doesn't have to go down that way, but I think I think the Florida match was more the fluke than the entire rest of the stage. I think they just were playing a little rough that day. So I expect them to double down and come back hard this weekend and get the wins and get the maps where they need them here against Toronto, who's just another team in free fall.
Yep. Last match of the week here, we've got the Chengdu Hunters versus the Seoul Dynasty. Chengdu's just not. They're not up to. They're not cutting the mustard right now. I think that's a figure of speech. They're not that good right now. Seoul's looking again. I'm not sold on the Seoul. You know, swap out your whole roster with Jae Hong as all-time QB, but it seems to be working at least somewhat, and I think it's going to work against Chengdu. Give me Seoul 3-1.
Chengdu's also swapping things around a little bit much as they try to get Jikarin in a little bit, and I think it's calmed down how much they're subbing, but it's still a little too often, and they just don't seem to have, despite some really strong players and some really quality pieces on the team. I think they can build around for the future, but they just don't seem to have the cohesive ability that we're seeing the Valiant and Houston show at times, and they're just lacking, and it's surprising because they were the true architects of this strategy. They've been doing it since stage 1, but I think it's telling that it only started working when other teams started doing it. So yeah, I don't know. Give me Seoul here 3-1. Chengdu's not the team to punish them for their terrible roster management.
Yep, not going to happen. One last thing before we get going here, we just breaking 2 minutes ago got the patch notes in, and for PTR, nothing big. No substantive changes. There were some bug fixes. They added subtitles or something, but nothing that would even be an allusion to something that would be an Overwatch League. So no need to worry there. No need to go.
You still got the McCree buff and the Diva nerf headed into stage 4 anyways, and then the possibility of that roll lock. So
yep.
We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of thought this was going to be, and it could still be. It could, because it was like a gigabyte patch, which is pretty big. So I could see it containing the new hero, and just the switch hasn't been flipped to actually make it accessible, because we're coming around to new hero time. It's that time of year, so it's got to be soon.
Yep, but that is going to be it. Until it's official, we'll remain judicial. That's going to be our stance there on all that stuff. But guys, that is going to be it for the episode here. Make sure you check us out on all the socials. We're High Noon Podcast everywhere, including Spotify. Make sure you check out Spotify. High Noon Productions will find all of the shows that we do. Make sure you go there. You can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/HighNoonPodcast if you so desire. Throw us a couple bucks there, and it does help us out a ton to do all the cool stuff, like go to BlizzCon, go to Grand Finals, get mics and stuff so that we don't have horrific audio like we have in the past, all that good stuff. All that does help out, of course. But, guys, that is going to be it for Deathblow. I am the Blevins, and remember, it's high noon.
Got his boots and he put on his hat. Threw the coin away that same day. It's in his past and he's not looking back. He says, finding mine now, God's my way. He's not good, but he sure ain't bad. He'll make amends for the sins that he has. He says, I'll change the world one bullet at a time till I find mine.
Give me Florida win, and give me a Toronto win. And that will be the birthday gift that I deserved instead of an 0-4 Toronto loss. That's what I want.
What did I ever do to you?
Late birthday. Late birthday.